Greetings and salutations to our fine podcast audience. Welcome to 3 Peas in a Pod, episode 284.
We made it.
Yes, we did, Nathan. And when's the last time we posted one of these? Anybody know?
It would have been before 2026.
Yeah.
So this is the
Christmas.
first one of 2026.
That's correct.
Shows how much I know about this podcast. I just
also-
show up. I don't know what we're doing until Charlie tells me. I didn't know it was 284 until Charlie just told me.
Charlie keeps us on track.
Yeah, I'm clueless.
Charlie's shaking his head vigorously to make sure that we let the watching or listening audience know he is not responsible for anything that happens.
Yeah.
He wants to make sure we let them know anything that is said. There's probably a disclaimer that comes up at the beginning of this, which is the views expressed on this podcast do not reflect on Charlie Davenport.
And may not reflect the views of these three 5 minutes after they're done with the
Very
podcast.
possible.
Yeah, as soon as we hit the stop button's like, what was I saying?
Very possible.
No, not
This
you.
review no longer reflects anyone's views.
We are always honest to what we're thinking in that moment.
Oh, you're always catching a moment in time.
That's right.
That's
That's
what
right.
you're doing.
This
Maybe
is really
that
a
should be the
document.
new title, A Moment in Time, with
That-
3 peas in a pod.
That sounds like a bad soap opera.
Yes.
A moment in time.
Well, are there any good ones?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think
I
I've
don't
ever
think-
watched
I
a soap opera.
don't
in
think
my
there are
life.
any good ones.
I watched a lot of what the teenage soap. When I was growing up, Dawson's Creek was a soap opera esque
Pretty much.
teen soap opera type stuff.
Mhm.
The OC.
So is college football in the NFL.
Own kind of stuff.
Oh,
They've
that's-
got their own drama.
That's a great topic, but not for today's episode.
No.
Today's episode, we are going to be responding to a specific comment or suggestion.
Suggestion.
A suggestion. It was a suggestion someone left to us, and we'd like to talk about the suggestion.
Yeah.
So Nathan has thoroughly.
One, I'd like to give a shout out to my friend Tatiana.
She did. She's the one who left the suggestion.
I don't know that she thinks I'm her friend.
No, well, you'll find out now. You ain't my friend, David. But anyway, Nathan, you've thoroughly investigated this suggestion.
Well,
I
as
did
thoroughly
not.
as I could.
I did not.
Yes.
So more thoroughly than I did. So
That
I'm
is
gonna-
true.
I didn't know Tatiana listened to the podcast until Nathan brought it up.
There you go.
Right now. Okay, so Nathan's going to tee this suggestion up for us.
I will. So Tatiana sent in a suggestion more than, I mean, it was in the form of a question, but it really was more of a suggestion. She said, can you guys read some Reddit stories on
I
the
have that
podcast?
capability.
Yeah.
I
And
do
then-
have that capability.
But I never have.
No.
Okay.
And she said, and respond to them from I think a Christian worldview or a biblical worldview, something like that.
Yeah.
Charlie's nodding his head. He's saying, I've got the gist of the question. So I texted Tatiana, who is a good friend of mine, and said, what do you mean by Reddit stories? And she responded back and sent me actually a link to some videos of podcasts that do a similar thing. And she said she thought it might just be fun if we did it because none of these podcasts are Christian podcasts. They are not from a Christian worldview. And many of those, so once I saw what she was talking about, I've actually seen several of these. They're very popular, like, especially in like Reel or Shorts or TikTok kind of form, you know, when you're scrolling through.
When you're looking for deep understanding.
Yeah, when you're really wanting
when
to
you have
get
30
into
seconds
the
to
weeds
get
of
the
life.
important things.
Or
That's
for me, AI dogs.
There you go.
That's what's on my algorithm right now.
I get the little AI baby podcast.
I get those too.
Have you seen those?
Yes.
Those are adorable.
The babies
So-
are awesome.
This doesn't matter to anybody else. I only get ancient MLB stuff.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
What you all would think was ancient. It
Yeah.
was my grown up time.
There you go. So I watched a couple of these, and then once I knew what they were, I kind of saw it. And most of these come from different Reddit threads where
Ed's getting a phone call. Is it important, Ed?
No.
Oh, okay.
different Reddit threads where people will post like personal stories, and usually they come in the form of what is most often referred to. I'll phrase it this way politely for the Christian podcast: "Am I the butthole?"
But it's not.
But it's not butt. It's not butt. And it is frequently people who have found themselves in difficult or complex or messy relational circumstances. And they're wanting to find out who's in the wrong here.
They feel bad about their response and want to know if they're right and feeling bad about it.
That's right.
So they're looking for validation.
I think most of the time.
That's what I
Now,
think.
maybe these are a little more confessional.
Maybe.
But
And I'm going to say what I said when they asked that and said, if you have to ask the question, are you,
yeah,
you
Right.
already have your answer.
it might be. Yes.
Unless you were super sensitive.
So I went and found a Reddit thread with these, and I'll give a couple examples of ones that I've seen. So one is like, I'll just put, am I wrong? Am I in the wrong?
Mhm.
Am I in the wrong that my roommate is a light sleeper, and after multiple complaints from her, I advised her to see a doctor?
Huh.
And so that's one. Another one is, am I in the wrong for telling my future mother-in-law that it wasn't my responsibility to check up on my fiance's younger brother?
Wow.
Am I in the
These
wrong?
are super specific.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They're almost all, and because once again, I think, and then there are, on many of these, like there's 5 comments on one. This one right here.
Those are both boundary issues sort of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, here's one. Am I in the wrong for making my wife ride in the back seat because she couldn't stop distracting me? That one has 2.4 thousand comments. Under it.
Wow.
So as you can imagine, so anyway, multiple different ones. Some are funny, some
Yeah.
are really sad, some are really difficult. Sometimes people are looking for advice.
Mhm.
Sometimes people are just looking for validation.
Yep.
Sometimes all different kinds of things. And so
And I bet there's a large portion that are made up.
oh, yeah.
Like everything on the internet.
Well, and I will say in particular, we were having this conversation before because all of us certainly, and even I'm a millennial. I came of age in the age of the internet, but Reddit is past the point. I was a youth minister once people were doing Reddit.
Mhm.
Neither of you have really any experience with Reddit.
Not
I have very little because it is it is moderated. I want to say that for the legal department. There are people who moderate Reddit, but it is very poorly moderated, I will say. There's a lot of very offensive and content that would not be good for me to interact on a regular basis on Reddit. And so I don't really have much with it. But as often happens on Reddit, and from what I understand from other people, I think much of it is made up. Much of it is intentionally incendiary.
It's entertainment.
Yeah.
It's entertainment for most people. And so I think from what I understood from my conversation with Tatiana, she was hoping we could do what other podcasts do, which is other podcasts will take these and then they respond. They go,
Yeah.
well, here's what I think you should do in this situation, or here's who I think's in the wrong. And we could do this from a Christian worldview. And I totally understand that. And so I told her I would look into it, and I'm responding now on the podcast.
Okay.
So,
Set us up. What are we going to discuss?
well, here's kind of my thought around it that I thought might be good for us to have a conversation around, which is I think unlike other podcasts or other things, one that are primarily for entertainment purposes, we really have set up our podcast in such a way that we are 3 Ps in a pod.
Yeah.
As we say, 3 pastors,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what we used to say at the beginning of every episode, but still rings true for us, is we're trying to get people to think in a Jesus-centered way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We want people to think in a Jesus-centered way. But that's not the same as, I don't know, someone on another podcast who's just trying to give out random life hacks or random life advice to solve specific problems. We really believe in order to think in a Jesus-centered way, I must first make a decision about who Jesus is and begin following the path of Jesus, submitting to his will and to his way of life. And so the advice that comes from us in any given one of these stories that may come, we could certainly give advice on any of it that would be similar to any other podcast that could say, if you like Ed mentioned earlier, saying there, Jesus has no problem with you having healthy boundaries with your mother-in-law about what you can and can't do for certain family members. There's nothing that would prohibit that in the way. But to see it from a Jesus point of view, my end goal for that relationship with my mother-in-law, or for what it was like my fiance's brother or whatever,
Yeah.
that's may be different, or I should say it should be different because of Jesus.
Yeah, the reason I
another
would set the
person.
boundary might be different. I have found a lot of times, particularly when, I am of the age that remember when there was no book called Boundaries or Boundaries for Kids or Boundaries for Left-Handed People.
Or Boundaries for
You know, all the other things. I remember when that book wasn't written. And when people first got a hold of it, the main idea most people I got that wanted boundaries was not, it was simply my self-protection,
Right.
which there is a degree.
Mhm.
It's sort of like, fences are not just to protect the people inside the fence.
That's right.
Mhm.
They're
Mhm.
property lines. That's all they are. You put
They keep me overreaching.
as a guy who
inward.
grew up with, in a ranch, and you have fences. People on the other side of the fence had cattle too, and we're just separating out who belongs to what.
Mhm.
It wasn't that I'm mad at you. It wasn't for my self protection because your cattle come over and I can sell them. That's for my benefit, But that'd have been the stealing.
Mhm.
Most of the time, I would have to say to people from a Christian point of view, I'm setting a boundary not only for my good, but for your good.
Yeah.
Right.
When I have to draw a boundary with someone who is constantly stepping into my property and I mean morally, physically, whatever, and doing damage, it's also doing damage to them.
That's right.
And if I only focus on me, it will protect me
Mhm.
to a degree, but it isn't Jesus focused.
Right.
The Jesus centered view is I want to draw the line that is for my good and God's glory.
Mhm.
And God's glory is ultimately that both of us would flourish.
Right.
Mhm.
I don't have any power over making you flourish,
That's right.
but the motivation is different. The action, in fact, may look the same to everyone.
Yeah.
But the motivation behind it is different.
Mhm.
And I think there are laws of God that are in place that are universal. And I could give them to people, and on the ones that they want to decide to apply, they would work.
Right.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have their full impact because there's an obedience part of it that lends to more benefit for me.
But I think you said it clearly there, Ed. You said they would work. And I think when you talk about the motivation most of us have when we ask questions like this, that's really what we're after. Most
Right.
people, when they ask these advice type questions, is they want to know what will work for my good
Yeah.
and what my desires or my dreams or my hopes are,
Mhm.
because that's central.
Yeah.
And that's usually why we're asking the question. To your point, Nathan, Jesus takes us out of all of that. It stands
right.
above and beyond all of those
That's right.
questions. And we don't first ask what is for my good,
Yes.
Well, and
because that may not be the best thing in the kingdom of God. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
And it can lead to short-sightedness on my part if my only view is what is my. So we'll just take I don't know whether an AI made it up or somebody made it up. I'm going to tell my mother-in-law, I ain't going to look after your son.
Mhm.
I'm marrying your daughter.
Mhm.
I ain't looking after your son.
Yeah.
I get why you would want to say that.
Mhm.
But
Sure.
I would know, as a person who's now been married 45 years, for you, and I get early on in your marriage, you want to establish a boundary.
Yes.
But long term, if you think I can have nothing to do to help my brother-in-law, who is my wife's brother, and I can draw hard boundaries with her mom, and long term, that's not going to be to my detriment.
Yeah.
I am short-sighted because I have done something for my personal good that may not long-term be good for my wife, who also needs to draw her own boundary. I shouldn't be drawing a boundary that's going to impact her family, because it is, you know what I'm saying? And Jesus would have me to say, hey, one, I should pray. I should talk to the Lord about this. What's the overall situation here? I should talk to my fiance about this and say, let's come up with something. You know what I'm saying? There are more people involved than my personal feelings of there's this woman I'm not marrying that now wants to put a new burden in my life.
Well, I think you're getting to something that
You know what I mean?
was kind of my thought, which is these situations are more complex than even a Reddit thread can get to.
Mhm.
And once again, I can give advice to a person in my church who comes to me and asks this question. In fact, I've given lots of advice to people about boundaries they need to have with their family, with their in-laws, with all different kinds of people. But those are back and forth conversations, and they're with people that I'm pastoring. They are people who either are fully submitted to Jesus because they have been baptized and they're saying, I want to follow Jesus. I've surrendered my life, my allegiance to Jesus. Or they're people who are coming to our church in the hopes of, I'm trying to figure out the Jesus thing, and tell me if I did buy into this Jesus thing, how would I handle this situation? That's an easier way, and I'm confident Jason has done all these kind of things in a counseling office, even aside from, because you have clients that come in who aren't necessarily interested in the Jesus thing. And you can give complex advice based on these things. But for a podcast, my thing would be taking a complex story like this, making an episode of it, where I'm giving kind of a life hack or an advice for this particular situation, that then other people may pull a general principle out of and go, oh, what Ed just said about drawing boundaries with in-laws, that applies to my situation. Well, I don't know that applies to your situation.
That's right.
It may have applied to this particular situation we're talking about because things are more complex. Now that's
and I just made up what was going on with those in-laws in my head.
Yes,
I just made it all. I don't know that any of that.
Yeah, and so that's one element. But I think the bigger thing, and this does get to what we try to do in this podcast, which is to help people think from a Christian worldview. And your question was, how do I help people think from a Christian worldview with these particular things? Well, a Christian worldview begins with Christ.
Yep.
So a Christian worldview begins with the belief that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, that he is the King of Kings, ruling and reigning, that he has a kingdom, and that I can live in that kingdom. And there is a way I live in that kingdom right here and now. But there is a fullness of that kingdom that is coming one day, which I will fully live into. And so all of Christian ethics is bound up in that. It is not bound up in even what quote unquote works in this life. That isn't to say that Jesus' way doesn't work. It just works in the kingdom. And it works for kingdom goals. It works, if my goal, as Jesus would say in the Sermon on the Mount, is to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, which means his right ordered way of living, the way he says, this is the way it works in the kingdom. It may not work for my goals in this life. If my goal is, I want to have a marriage where, our sex life is super exciting and we both make tons of money and we both go on a bunch of adventures together, but my wife doesn't have that goal. Or there are other multiple reasons that wouldn't necessarily work for us. But I say, I want to have a Christian view of marriage. Often what I think people mean unknowingly is, how do I go about getting that exciting sex life, lots of money, go on lots of adventures life without breaking any of God's moral laws, and in such a way where God will help me make that happen?
Oh, yeah.
Not, what if Christ's view of it is, I married a person and I thought they were one way. Turns out they were another way. And Christ's way is...
And every person that ever married anybody, including the three of us, all the people that married the three of us, they got somebody other than they thought they were getting.
Yeah, it's the nature of it. You grow, they grow, we develop, whatever. And then my responsibility, according to Ephesians, is I'm supposed to lay down my life for you like Christ laid down for the church. Not, and then if I do that, that'll convince her to have sex the way I want to have sex. And that'll convince us to spend money the way I want to spend money. It may not work in that way. But that doesn't mean it didn't work in the kingdom, because what it did is it made me a more Christ-like person, a person who actually enjoys.
If I eventually, it makes me more Christ-like if I made a commitment to Jesus that I would follow his life and his way. I made a commitment to my wife that I would marry her basically in a stupid contract, no matter what. We all just in love, whatever you do, wherever happens, I'm for you, baby. and I will be with you forever. That kind of stuff that I just laughed at and said is stupid are the kind of commitments that do produce in me the kind of Christ-like behavior if I really want to honor them, because I may have to die to some of those personal goals I have. And Jesus' goal for me is to not just die eventually. I need to die before I die to me so he can fully live in me.
Yeah. So there may be certain things in any individual question that someone would send in or in their own life experience that might be boring one to watch on a video every time I go, well, have you surrendered your life to Christ and his will? Because all of the biblical advice is centered under that worldview. We've often said things here like, hey, you should test out Jesus' commands and try those things out. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that because we've all said that. We think that's a fine way to begin as you're trying to find your way to Jesus. That's just not what the scripture says. I mean, that's not what Jesus says. He's not like, hey, just take this stuff and go kind of figure me out that way. It begins with follow me and I'll make you X, Y, and Z. This is how the world's going to go. It is important to figure out if I'm going to center my life on Christ. We believe, and we just had a whole series of meetings with some volunteers here. We were talking about how do we teach people things and how do we do this? And one of our big things was we don't believe any individual life hack. Here's how to fix your marriage. Here's how to fix your parenting. Here's how to fix your money. Here's how to fix blah, 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 whatever. Walk it down. That's not the solution for us. The solution for us is Jesus. And that I get, and this is where I think, once again, because we're putting this on the internet, people on the internet, and maybe people in our personal lives get kind of frustrated with church people because they're like, well, that's your answer to everything. Your answer to everything is just go to Jesus with it. Your answer to everything is trust Jesus.
Well, again, we say pretty often around here, Jason says it more often because he's often the host of, we're Jesus people. Yeah. So I don't have much beyond that. And I'm not claiming to have much beyond that. I don't have original material of how to make your life better. Everything I have ultimately is derivative in me following Jesus. And
as we've already said before this, I can't remember if we said this when we were filming or not, so maybe it wasn't before this. That isn't to say that in any of those situations, there's not good advice that we would also give to a person there. I mean, often in many situations, my advice to most people is, hey, think that through for a minute. That's not necessarily, I'm not saying that's against the Jesus way. That's not a particular Jesus-centered way to do something.
No, I'm confident, Jason, I'm guessing you would say this is true. You're helping people set boundaries whether they're Christians or not Christians.
Absolutely. Every day.
You're helping people think about their spouse and their point of view, whether they're Christian or not Christian.
Sure. Well,
and to listen to each other and to hear each other and to see each other's point of view on things. And
because that's what it means to be in a relationship.
That's right.
That's right.
That's really not a Jesus thing or not. No, I mean, it's just relational.
It's just the way it is. Yeah. Jesus is often explaining the way God designed the world.
Yes.
Well, and I watch some of these videos.
Yes.
And these people who are not believers who are giving advice on like, yeah, I do think you're in the wrong. I go, yeah, I think that guy's right. You are in the wrong. Or, hey, no, that's okay for you to stand up for yourself. And I go, yeah, I think, we don't have to agree about Jesus to agree, hey, if you waste money on this thing, then you're not going to have money later. It's not, well, what would the Jesus approach be on that? Yeah. It is maybe higher level or maybe whichever direction, maybe more foundational level, deeper level, which is, what is Christ's goal for me and for this world? And then I can take wisdom, which is the ability to think things through and the ability to see how things work in this life and go, well, then as Jesus would say, I want to be innocent as doves and as wise as serpents. I can have wisdom that is in, worldly wisdom. But it's got to be centered in the will of God, which is I want what God wants for me. There is not, there's all good kind of financial advice out of there. It doesn't have to be stamped with Christian financial advice. There's good financial advice out there. There's good relational advice out there. It doesn't have to be stamped with Christian relational. But for the Christian, I begin from the foundation of what does Christ want for me and my relationships with other people? And then I have to run anything else through that lens.
And not just with other people. You mentioned money. I do have to, what's his relationship he wants me to have with money?
Mhm.
What's his relationship he wants me to have with stuff? Because there is good financial advice that can come to you that is also anti-Christian.
That's right.
It's really good.
Because
But
it doesn't go for the goal that Christ has.
Yeah.
But can we also acknowledge that there will be, I can't think of one specific right now, but I think it's true that in order to live the way of Jesus, that you may actually make contradicting decisions sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
There will be
Yeah.
times when you will make this decision in this circumstance and maybe the opposite decision in
Yes,
this
Well,
because
that's-
circumstance
life is complicated.
because it's complicated.
Well, and love is complicated.
Yes.
Love is not as simple. Doing the loving thing
Mhm.
is not the same for every person. I used to, when I was leading all things around here, I'd say to people all the time, making a rule for people you're leading and you want to have a standard that everybody does by is
Yeah.
an unloving standard, because what you did is you took a standard you set for one person and you applied it to everybody.
Mhm.
Well, everybody ain't the same.
No.
You
And every
should do-
situation is not the same.
You should do what's right for the people in the situation, because we're leading from a different point of view than an HR department.
Yeah, which is a Christian kind of worldview, because what you see once again in the scriptures is that God is giving us wisdom for how to live. So there are certainly wisdom books in the scripture. Jesus then is the fulfillment of all wisdom, wisest person who ever lived. But then he sets us within a community of people who get formed by that wisdom, formed by the scriptures, formed by the Spirit of God. And so for any of, these kind of situations, the best way to handle them is not to bring them to a podcast.
Mhm.
Once again, for the Christian, it is to go to a pastor that you trust. It is to go to a leader in your church that you trust. It's to go to an older Christian that you trust and say, hey, you know me, you know God's will. And can we talk through this so that you can help me discern what it looks like to handle this in a loving relationship? The internet, unfortunately, has made it this way where I want to believe I can just take complex ideas, boil them down to a sentence, and then apply that sentence to my life.
Mhm.
And what we have to be able to do is to be people who go, life is more complex than that. And I have to be submitted to Christ and to Christ's people in such a way that I am willing to allow other people's listening of the Holy Spirit and listening to the scriptures to influence my life as well. I do not worry about it. Well, I want to be clear too. I know this was not any of what Tatiana's original question was. And I want to say that because we talked back and forth, and most of it was, hey, I think this might be a fun thing on the podcast. But I did think it was an important thing, once again, for the three of us to talk about why we even do the podcast in the first place, which is we've always said we want to get people to think in a Christ-centered way. And this really is, in my opinion, what we've said here of, I've got one go, am I really submitted? Do I want what Christ wants for my life?
And the way I can know that, there are ways I can check myself. If obedience to the commands of Jesus aren't my first checkpoint,
Right.
nothing much good happens in my relationship with God or others. I can't justify being disobedience to direct command of God. There is a reason he asked me to just obey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
if you love me, you obey
so
my command.
I'm obeying.
Yeah.
And then there are gray areas
Mhm.
on the other side of obedience that I'm going to say,
Yeah.
okay, is this God's goal for me is to love him? So that's the obedience part. Now, am I loving to the other people in my world?
What you're describing, it is the difference between obeying a rule or a standard or principle and desiring that the fruit of the Spirit would come of it all.
Yes.
And sometimes obeying a specific rule that out of context looks like, yeah, that's the right answer, right?
Mhm.
Can bring about bad fruit.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
right.
And if you're not wise enough to connect those two and to at least do your best to see around that corner and go, I may be following a rule correctly, but I may be causing bad fruit.
Yeah.
I may want to pause for a second. I'm not saying you wouldn't
Well,
follow
it's
that rule.
why
But what is that fruit?
it's
And
why Christianity is not to be lived in solo
that's right.
communication.
That's right. Absolutely.
I should say to somebody at some point, obedience to Christ's command says this.
Yeah.
Loving this person to me is really complicated. Can you help me figure out how I can do both of this wisely for the good of this person
Yeah.
and the good of God's command? Because
Mhm.
God's commands are always for my good and for his glory. And there is a way to obey and also love this person. It just probably is more complicated than I can think through on my
Well,
own.
for example, Jesus told a rich man, he said, what do I do? Jesus said, you go sell everything you got and come and follow me. So the next time a rich man comes to me and says, what do I do? If I gave him that rule,
Right.
I would be grossly
Mhm.
abusing this person
That's
and
right.
misrepresenting Jesus. I gotta get into this person's life. I gotta find, Jesus knew. He knew this guy inside and out.
Yeah.
And there was something about this guy that
That he
wanted to
needed that.
challenge.
He needed that.
Yeah, and he knew that. I don't know that. And so I'm just using that as an example of saying, because if somebody walked up and I said, sell everything you got and give it away, and they got a sick family member at home who's dying, that's going to be
Mhm.
harmed by that, well, that's wrong. that's
That's
not
right.
the way of Jesus either.
That's right.
So
Mhm.
my point is there's nuance in pretty much everything when you view it that way
Yeah.
Mhm.
of what are the fruits of the Spirit that Jesus brings out in our lives and in the lives of the people around us. How do we get there? And it's not always, I'll follow this rule.
Mhm.
Sometimes
No.
it takes some work or some nuance.
No,
or
it
some-
definitely
Yeah.
often in a real life situation often requires a lot of talk, a lot of prayer.
Mhm.
I would always just direct somebody to, you will not directly disobey a rule of God. There will be an answer that you can do the loving thing for the person in the situation, or
Mhm.
be obedient to God,
Mhm.
but it may take you a minute to get there. And you're completely right. It isn't just obey every rule.
That's right.
And it's not just love people.
That's right.
It's neither one of those. There is also a part of that some people fall into. There's a third, God's goal for me, and I said this earlier, is no one can follow Jesus without daily dying.
Mhm.
And, there's one of the, Paul in Colossians 3 starts with, since then you have died with Christ.
Yeah.
He
He assumes that.
Yeah, he assumes that. Set your minds on heavenly things. Since you're already dead,
Yeah.
there's no need for you to think about things on earth.
Mhm.
Set your mind on heavenly things.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when it comes to that balance of the rule and the other person, I think the hard part for most of, but I will say, I don't think it's most of us. I think it's most people. Because I do think it's different. I think the longer you have walked with Jesus, God's love becomes more clear to you. But I do think when you are early starting, you don't just inherently know what love is. I just recently listened to
No.
guy. There's a guy who's got I'll think of his name. Nijay Gupta, who's a
Yeah.
he's got a book coming out called I can't remember, something about basically love in Paul's theology, and his basic point is that preachers love to use this term agape love because it's the thing. What he basically said was no one actually in Greek ever used the term agape before Paul.
That's right.
He said and he gave some number, but like phileo was the normal one, which is and he said,
Love between people.
well, and he said that
Brotherly love.
but what he said was that's the way we've often done it, is to say this one's love between people. What he basically said was what Paul's trying to get them to do is there is a love you've never experienced, which makes this not actually love.
Mm-hmm.
That phileo is that there is the worldly love, which is what all of us go, well, this is the loving thing to do because we've been formed in the worldly way, which is mostly self-focused and mostly this. And he says, you've got to start to understand the only way to understand love is through God.
Mm-hmm.
And once you understand that, then you can understand love. And so then the commands of God, obedience to the commands of God, teach me what it actually is to love. It's like if I told a person who was trying, one of my daughters is learning to play guitar right now. I can't start her with jazz ever. And she may not get to, I've been playing for 24 years now, and I'm just now starting to even understand how to do anything with jazz chords. Because what jazz is this master level of, now that I know all the rules, I can break some of
them
the
all.
rules.
Yeah.
I can break some of them and find
Because
the
I
in-between.
understand the overall goal was music.
Yeah, I can understand what's happening in between. But I think sometimes what happens is, and this would go back to my point of not just taking what we said on the podcast and then going, well, that's a principle for me, is sometimes for people, and I'm 3 months into following Jesus, and when I hear, well, I just gotta go love people, I think I know what that means.
Well,
Because for me, love means affirming everything you want and trying to support you in everything you want.
making
whatever
sure
goal you
every
got.
dream you have for yourself is fulfilled.
Yeah, or making you never feel anything negative or any of those different kind of things, or not ever hurting your feelings,
Yeah.
not ever like there's all these other things that get thrown into it, which is not God's view of love.
No, and I would also say, you said the longer you walk with Christ, your view of love changes and deepens, gets richer. My experience, and this may only be me because I am one of those, I naturally have aversion to anybody telling me what to do. My appreciation for the law of God has grown so deeply that all of those Psalms and that talk about, I love the law of God. Once you grow, you do see there's a great love for the law of God once you understand its purpose that leads you to love more deeply. They aren't in any way in conflict.
Right.
They
And
aren't.
I think that's a natural byproduct of learning how to trust.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because the more your trust deepens for God, the more you will surrender to his law and the things that he says are good and right. And you won't necessarily question that the way that you would have before. So, yeah.
So with any person's, once again, Reddit story, the advice we give, probably, and what I mean is when you want it from a Christian worldview, it may be almost indistinguishable at times from a secular worldview. And you wouldn't be able to hear that on the podcast because what we say and what the guys on some other podcasts would say would sound the same. And you'd go, oh, well, I guess a Christian worldview and the secular worldview are the same. Well, not in everything.
Yeah.
Well, you'd have to get deeper. Then sometimes the Christian worldview, if you're not submitted to Christ and Christ's kingdom, would almost sound like gibberish. Would almost sound like, well, that would never work. That would never work out for you. And it wouldn't. And so one thing we are going to do out of this, I know this whole thing sounds like I'm saying, well, we're not going to do that suggestion. Actually, one thing that's come out of that suggestion was it had occurred to me, and maybe on the next episode we'll do this, when we don't have questions, there's a whole bunch of Reddit questions about questions to pastors and questions. I found a couple that I thought were pretty intriguing and might lead to some good discussions on here. So thank you, Tatiana, for the suggestion, because we would have never come to that.
She's opened up a new world for us.
She's opened up a new world, and she probably did not listen 38 minutes into this. So, or you did, and you can text.
Can't imagine anybody did.
I'm shocked at the people.
If you did, you can let us know that by filling out that form on the description. Send us a question, and you can keep us off of Reddit for a little bit.
Yeah,
there you
that'd
go.
be good.
So, see what happens next week. We'll find out. See ya.